I'd like to open up this video by saying that the title lied. I don't actually believe perfection can exist. If the perfect game were a thing, then that's that. What's the point of trying to innovate when perfection has already been reached? However, if there ever was a sequel to a game that outshines its predecessor in every way, expands on every minor aspect without changing the foundation, then that would be a perfect sequel. And I think Shadow Heart's Covenant is as close to it as we'll ever get. Released as Shadow Hearts 2 in Japan, this game follows up on the bad ending of the first game and sets out to improve upon all systems laid down by the original. And holy shit does it do an amazing job at exactly that. The year is 1915. The First World War is causing devastation on a global scale, and the new protagonist, Karen König, a German imperial lieutenant, is sent to retrieve an item from a mysterious tower with the aid of a priest from the Vatican by the name of Nikolai. Nikolai is evil, by the way. This would usually be a spoiler, but the game spoils it the second you open the character description, so who cares? With this being a sequel and whatnot, Yuri naturally retains all his abilities and fusions from the end of the last game, and oh wait, never mind, I guess.
What the hell is this?
Compelled by the power of Christ, Yuri absorbs a mistletoe and kisses his fusion souls goodbye, giving us an excuse to collect them all anew. How fun! And that's basically the setup we're given. You're fugitives from a group of terrorists and the German army, while trying to figure out how to cure Yuri's curse, which then proceeds to lead into a bunch of political corruption featuring a lot of Russians and Japanese people. Just like with the first game, I really like the setup. It's quite refreshing to see a fantasy RPG with such a unique setting, especially playing during World War I, when most games at the time either play in Japan, specifically Tokyo, or entirely fictional worlds. While the introductory cutscene of this game does a fantastic job of setting up a very dark and foreboding atmosphere, the first thing I noticed from this game is the complete absence of gore. Seriously, what happened? The intro has bombs flying around and exploding and corpses just everywhere and demons and brutality, yet not a single drop of blood is ever spilled. Which is really weird, especially when contrasted by the sheer amount of gore the last game had. But at least the game has gotten a major visual overhaul. It actually looks good now. And the voice cast is really solid, especially on the villain's side of things. I also think this is a good time to mention that, for some reason, the battle animations kind of glitch out while emulating it, but it doesn't actually affect the game in any way, so don't worry about it. But sorry if it bothers you while watching this video. On the gameplay side of things, so much has changed that we would be here for days if I were to discuss every little change. So instead, let's just go over the big ones. For starters, the basic attacks function more or less the same, but there are now multiple types of standard attacks that are useful for combos. You can send enemies flying against the nearest wall, knock them to the ground, or send them rocketing into the sky. Sanity points make a return. However, now Yuri's fusions take a set amount of SP each turn, instead of just one big batch of SP right after fusing. And there's a lot more to going berserk now, like being able to faint. Funnily enough, I was able to beat the first boss despite both my characters going berserk, and I even got it all on a recording.
Here it comes.
Earlier I mentioned that you can attack enemies in different ways now. They are usually not much different from normal attacks, however the game has one very big change that drastically benefits from this addition. The battle position system from the first game was heavily changed, and now every character freely moves around on the battle arena during an attack, and on top of this, all spells have been changed from hitting a certain number of enemies to having a specific area of effect that is different depending on the attack's strength. By far the biggest change to the gameplay, however, is the aforementioned addition of the combo system. Whenever characters stand directly next to each other, they'll be able to chain their next turn directly onto the character they're standing next to. You can chain several back to back, and the more you do, the stronger subsequent attacks become. And should you manage to do a combo with every character, the last one to attack will be able to use an incredibly powerful combo spell for maximum damage. On top of all this, you can now also see the turn order and a rough estimate of enemies as HP, allowing you to more carefully strategize around every encounter, which works really well when considering the race encounter rate. Another gameplay element to get a massive overhaul was the magic system. While before only certain characters could learn certain spells, locking them into a specific element and character archetype without much wiggle room for experimentation, everyone now has two types of spells. For one, there are the character-specific spells that you need to fulfill special conditions for to obtain more. For Geppetto it's buying new dresses for restored Cornelia, for Blanca it's fighting other wolves, for Karen it's reading Shakespeare or some gay shit like that, and so on and so forth. And these function basically exactly the same as in the first game. However, almost all buffs, debuffs and elemental attribute changing spells have been moved to the other magic type, the crests. Almost every playable character, aside from Yuri, can now equip several crests that allow them to use magic in combat. Each crest has a different spell inside it, and you can increase the spells they hold by inserting all crests of a single type into their respective slots on the Key of Solomon. Since all crests can be freely mixed and matched between characters, it allows for a really nice customization. And because Yuri is no longer an overpowered sack of shit that can single-handedly demolish every enemy in the game, your party setup actually matters now. And as if all that wasn't enough, you can now also fully customize the Judgment Ring itself. You can choose between different types of rings, change how many attack spots it has, and even adjust their size and even bonus effects. This game really wants you to play around with its mechanics and experiment until you find the setup that is most comfortable for you personally. And I love it! It's rare that a game gives you this much free reign on how the game should play. Yuri as a character has perhaps had the biggest change out of everything else in this game, simply due to the way that fusions work now. With the metals accumulation mechanic and the Grim Reaper being completely absent from this entry, there's now a much bigger focus on getting soul energy. However, unlike the last game, every enemy gives you a certain amount of universal soul energy, and you can then use that amassed energy inside the greatly revamped Mind Graveyard to get a new fusion soul without actually fighting the damn thing, letting you choose the element of the fusion you want to obtain. Alternatively, you can use the souls to individually level up the fusions, allowing them to raise their stats and gain new abilities. Because of the change in how fusions now no longer take away one big batch right after fusing, but instead slowly chip away at your SP, it allows for a lot of strategizing and min-maxing for Yuri's current role as a character in combat, making you actually need to rely on other characters beside him, which once again gets us back to the point of customization. The game has so much optional content and The story is just so much more grand than the first game, really showing you the international all-out turmoil that the World War has caused people. And everyone is still trying to make the best out of their lives despite the world being in shambles. It also leads to some really strong character development, though admittedly the ending did have me a little baffled. And Lucia is the fucking worst. God, I hate her. Every scene she's in, she just completely ruins. She adds nothing to the cast and she is useless. There is absolutely no point in ever using Lucia unless you really hate yourself and want to self-inflict pain. Don't use Lucia and just pretend she doesn't exist. That'll make the experience just so much more enjoyable. Alongside with everything else, even the music has received a major upgrade, somehow even outdoing the already fantastic soundtrack of the first game. Every song is immensely memorable, be they town themes, battle themes, or even joke tracks. There is not a single moment in the entire game where they don't heavily intensify the mood of the current situation. I think that at this point it's pretty obvious that I really like this game. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that this is one of the best JRPGs I have ever played. And I'd even go as far as to say it's almost as good as Xenosaga Episode 3. It kept me hooked the entire way through and I never wanted to put it down. It does everything that the first game did on a much grander scale, improving upon every minuscule detail and adjusting what didn't work. It's honestly breathtaking how much effort and care went into making this game as good as it could possibly have been. And at the end, even after doing every side quest, getting every crest and ability and fighting every boss, I was still craving more. And as it turns out, there technically is more. Despite all the already existing content, all the side quests, customization and improvements, they still weren't done. As just a year after the release of the original game, they released Shadow Hearts 2, Director's Cut, adding new side quests, new dungeons, new temporarily playable characters, new backstory, new music, new everything. And they really went all out with what they did. While the West sadly never got to see the pretty much definitive version of this game, The great guys over at the Shadowhearts Wikia page have done a great job of recording every known change in addition to the Director's Cut version, translating it all for your reading pleasure. So, in conclusion, do I recommend Shadowhearts Covenant? Absolutely! In fact, I want you all to play it right now. It's cheap to buy online, both new and used, and you'll have a guaranteed great time. So what are you waiting for? Grab a couple of drinks and snacks and have some fun. Because really, isn't that what video games, even horror games, are all about in the end? Cheers, and have a happy Halloween!
That one giant pussy.